William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I welcome you to another Two Hats special of community events. Let's look in and see what's really happening.
And good afternoon and welcome to Lambda Weekly. I'm David Taffet here in the studio with late Patti Fink and Lerone Landis, our guest today. You know, we decided we were going to discuss the rally yesterday and some of the, this week in Trump, that kind of thing. So I decided to assemble a panel, and our panel is Karen McCrocklin. Welcome,
a fine
Karen.
Panel it is.
A fine panel it is. So, Patti, I figured today you'll be representing the alt-middle, and Karen, you're an alt-lesbian, and Lerone, you're the alt-control-delete. And I'll just be neutral like I always am.
It's just the space bar.
Tell us what happened yesterday, for anybody who hasn't watched the news, but what went on down at City Hall and also around the country, Karen?
Well, at City Hall last night, it was an interesting thing because rather than being a counter-protest to a bunch of white supremacists, this was a protest against white supremacy, but it wasn't a counter-protest. And so it was sort of a different entity than we've seen in a lot of other cities where, like in Boston, where they were going out to speak against the white supremacists who were having the rally. So it was a little bit different that way, but it was lovely in the sense that there were several thousand people there. The police did an incredible job.
Amazing.
I have huge gratitude to DPD for the way that they organized everything. And it
wasn't just DPD. Garland police were there
right.
In force. State troopers were there in force.
I had a long conversation with the guy that works for the sanitation department who was stationed in his dump truck at the corner of Ackerd and Young. I mean, it was really quite an impressive thing to see. It was very safe. It was a lovely sentiments. A lot of clergy spoke. It was a very sort of pro-peace kind of thing that was basically uninterrupted by, idiots.
So it was more of a proactive rally. What was kind of the main message? What were some of the things that were said in some of the speeches?
Peace, love, joining together. And
do you know where I was? I couldn't hear any of the speeches at all. There was a police helicopter circling fairly low and loud. The speakers were not the people speakers, the mechanical speakers.
The PA system.
Thank you. What wasn't great where I was. And
it wasn't great where I was either. But I ran into Dave Chaos, our very own station manager.
Yeah, and I took some pictures of some of the KNON people I ran into there.
And he said, next time we have one of these things, to call KNON, because we have equipment that can make everybody hear.
I'm on the verge of creating my own sound van to drive around for anyone that wants to speak. I didn't hear much either, David, but I'll tell you what I did do that was the best part of it for me. Like all of y'all, I'm no stranger to these types of events. But walking around in the crowd and looking at the faces, first of all, the diversity of the people there was amazing. Secondly, when you see people who are just so lit because, and it's quite obvious that they've not done this sort of thing before. They aren't like, oh, here I go to another protest, which shirt shall I wear? They were really the kind that were planning this. And I saw this on social media too. So many people who had not ever had that experience. And for them, I think it was incredibly empowering.
And I think that was part of the reason Lerone couldn't go, because he hadn't gotten a new shirt to wear for this.
I had not.
It's uncanny that you say that, though, because Aaron and I went through this. Is this too radical? And like trying on different things, because we have like every nuance of T-shirt. Like, is this, should I be more peaceful? Should I because
right.
we have the array.
Well, right. And I have, there's a no Trump symbol that looks sort of like the Nazi symbol, but I thought that was too much. So I put it on a T-shirt instead of having a red International No symbol. I put pink glitter because that felt more appropriate for the event. So, but I think the interesting thing to me though was that while the message was that of peace, the vast majority of the signs were anti-Trump.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know you guys didn't hear some of the speeches because you're too far away or whatever, but I wondered, did anybody talk about how to deal with the Nazis when they do show up in your city? There's a lot of conversation about that online, and I saw a video with some former, there's a group, and I forget what it's called, but some former Nazi white supremacy members, and they kind of gave their opinions on how to deal with them. And one of the main things that they said was not to engage with them. You're more than welcome to counter-protest, but don't get into physical altercations with them because that's what they want, and that legitimizes them.
Right.
What do you think about that? And
counter-protests can take all sorts of forms. I have a huge group of friends that are planning to counter-protest in San Francisco next week, having a disco party. Have you seen the video of the people with the tubas that went and drowned them out? I mean, that sort of thing is lighthearted, and it kind of makes them look dumb. I'm trying to figure out how to construct a glitter cannon that will just spray them with pink glitter if we see them from afar. But there's lots of ways to do it besides getting into fights with them.
And some people have even talked about doing the sort of Westboro Baptist Church approach, where you kind of let them be, but that you raise money and you almost laugh at them,
right.
Just holding signs and make it into a positive rather than give them what they want.
They did that somewhere recently where they were coming and they pledged money for every block that the Nazis marched. This group did, and they raised a whole bunch of money, and so that was a good strategy with Westboro too. So
now, while we're saying we were there, we were who they were protesting against. There weren't very many of them.
No.
There were, when I left, I kind of walked around the statue, far enough distance, but there were a few dozen people who were gathered around the Confederate monument in Pioneer Park. But a few dozen people there doesn't mean that they were all Nazis. There were a whole bunch of undercover police who were among those people. So maybe it was 24 or so actual.
Right. There were. My understanding is that there was a group of about 25 Antifa members who were marching over. We were the vigil, the rally was at City Hall, but Pioneer Park is where the statue is, and that's where the trouble was. And people were getting confused when they were seeing news reports, thinking we were in the middle of a big fight, which we weren't. But my understanding is that about 20 or 25 Antifa members were going over there, and Eric Folkerth from North Haven actually stood in front of them and said, "Please don't do this." And they, flipped him off and called him some names and went over there. And then I went back by last night about 10:30 maybe, and they were still down there, but it was all Antifa people standing up against the police. So
and explain who the Antifa people are.
Anti-fascism is a movement. It's primarily, in my opinion, composed of a lot of young men who are angry, who are sort of the other side of the equation from some of the white supremacist angry young men that are using this as a way to express their outrage more than it is their beliefs.
Mm-hmm. And they're primarily white.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
There's that.
Mm-hmm. If there's any hope or positive to see in all of this, I must say, in Boston, I think they had what? I read 40,000, but how many Nazi members showed up?
113.
Yeah. Okay, so look at the difference in numbers. That is encouraging. That is like, okay, there is still hope for this country when you see the counter and how many show up for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was the same thing here. I'm saying it was a few dozen people over there, but a number of them were undercover cops because the police were prepared for problems with that group. Plenty of police and plenty of undercover walking around, because I was walking around for a while with somebody who was undercover. Plenty of undercover in the main rally.
We ran into a bunch of them.
They weren't expecting problems. So, yeah.
We saw a bunch of them, and we just happen to know them. I mean, they come to every rally, and we know they're undercover cops. And I looked over and I said, the bedazzled backpack is a nice touch. They're really good at that.
There was one point where someone with a Confederate flag, this was early on, someone with a Confederate flag tried to come into the plaza in front of City Hall, and the police were very quick in handling that and escorting them out. And that was pretty much all.
And said to him, we're escorting you for your own protection. Did not arrest him. I mean, they might have if there was any kind of fight or something or resistance to them escorting him, but they escorted him away and said, you're not safe here. Which, again, the police handled it perfectly.
Exactly.
We took Darien last night and got out at Union Station. There were quite a few people on our train, in fact. And so we walked from Union to Dallas City Hall Plaza. And at one point, when we were sort of in front of the convention center, a truck with a big Confederate flag went through the light and, drove by. And we were kind of apprehensive at that point about what's going to happen. But by the time we got to the plaza, it was love. It was a lot of love. People were handing out water and ice and,
I was riding my bike, and I have to say that there were quite a number of large trucks with unsavory stickers on them cruising around the area, but they had to stay in their big trucks. They didn't get out.
Well, you couldn't park right near there either, so they closed off all the parking behind City Hall. They closed off the streets around City Hall, so they had to keep going. And there were plenty of police there to make the traffic go. Okay, so a lot of this is in response. Did you have some?
I was just going to say, yeah. Well, let's back up and what started all this. A lot of this is in response
to what happened last weekend in Charlottesville, and also to the new movement to get rid of the Confederate statues around the South.
New.
And it's not new.
It's not new at all.
But it's a rejuvenated effort, I think, and there's a reason for it now, which I don't know everybody understands what that reason is, but...
Well, I had this conversation this morning with someone that said, well, why all of a sudden does everyone care about this? And all I could think was, why all of a sudden are you noticing? You're noticing this, but I personally have tendinitis right now from copy-pasting the same reply to LGBT people saying, oh, but I love Lee Park. This, and so the whole concept. Charlottesville did one good thing in the sense that the whole concept of privilege and knee-jerk reactions and sentimentality. It really shined a spotlight on that, and it opened that dialogue in that sense.
And let's just put it out there: the monument in Lee Park. Forget what it's a monument of or to, or beautiful, grand monument that. When you're walking into the park, if you have no idea who this, who the adult is with the little boy and riding with him, well, that's what it looks like. It's Lee with his boyfriend. But if you have no idea what this is, it's a wonderful grand monument, them on the horse, and the monument downtown, the obelisk with the 4 statues around it. It's a beautiful grand monument. And we don't have to say it's ugly just because we don't like the message that it's a beautiful piece of art, both of them. However,
I think just what you said before that is part of the problem. If you don't know what it is, and that's the problem, a lot of people don't know what it is. We need to go back and have a civics lesson to this country. If you know what it is, then you'll probably be like, oh yeah, I wonder why they have statues of that up. We need to start with our president. He needs a civics lesson. And I think a lot of people when they're asking what's the big deal, you clearly don't know.
Charlottesville started, it started a bigger conversation about monuments as symbols. And my answer to LGBT people about Lee Park is this. I, like all of us, have amazing, wonderful, very fond memories of AIDS walks and pride celebrations and all of that in Lee Park. Concurrently, I've always thought, why are we doing this? But when people allow that sentimentality to overcome that, we were in that park asking for equality, and we were in that park asking allies to stand with us. And if we refuse to be allies now, then I don't even know what we were doing. It's absolutely unbelievable to me.
Well, people say they like Lee Park. The park isn't going away.
Right.
The statue is.
Right.
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 The best comment I heard was we should cut Lee off the horse and leave the horse because the horse did its best.
I totally agree with that sentiment. Or if you're going to, or if you're going to replace it with something, let's have a statue of Lee signing the surrender at Appomattox.
Exactly. If you want to, instead of astride a horse with a sword ready to slay people who were, who were anti-slavery.
Okay,
Right.
Lerone, you grew up in Texas. Patty, before you moved out of the country because you were an oil brat, you grew up in Texas.
Native.
Karen, you?
I'm an 8th generation Texan who was
Okay.
raised in New York, so I learned to
okay.
be simultaneously rude and tacky.
Okay, so you grew up in New York, I grew up in New York, moved down here.
Love that.
What was your reaction when you saw these monuments in cities across the South? Because in New York, there are no Civil War monuments. In other major cities in the Northeast, there are no Civil War monuments, not to the winners or losers.
Well, Lee Park is the worst example in this because not only do we have the statue, we have the replica of Arlington Hall, and inside Arlington Hall, the organization that has raised the money for Lee Park has all these artifacts. And so, were we going to tear down Arlington Hall? No. But I think it's appropriate to perhaps memorialize, the other side of the story. Here's my question, though. Where are the Korean War monuments in Dallas? Where are the Afghans, for these people that say history?
Is there a World War II monument in Dallas?
I don't know. But we've got,
so.
if we're going to memorialize history, go to the library. Let's take the money from maintaining the statues and give it to the libraries.
We need to take a break, but let's talk about that. Statues that will unite us rather than divide us. You're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 Knon FM. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Lerone Landis and the late Patti Fink. Our guest today is Karen McCrocklin. She was at the rally yesterday and has an opinion.
Yes.
This is Rollins Gilliland, and I'm listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3, and darn glad to be doing it.
And welcome back to Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet, and we are here with Lerone and Patti, and Karen McCrocklin is our guest. We're talking about the rally that happened at City Hall last night. About 3,000 people came. It might have actually been more because people were coming and going through the 2 hours. And the number that everybody was estimating and that I was using is based on how much of the City Hall Plaza was taken up and knowing how many people fit on City Hall Plaza. So it was about 2,500 that were there at any one time, but there were hundreds that were coming and going also. So I think there were over 3,000 people who participated last night. Okay, so we're talking a little bit about the monuments. The black community, Lerone, is split. You think not as split as I'm saying, but there is some split about whether or not to remove monuments.
Yeah, I think there's a minority of them who are against it, and their reasonings are they've lived with it for this long. It doesn't bother them. It's not going to change. It's not going to erase racism, which they're correct about that. It's just a matter, in my opinion, it's just the response I've seen from those who are against it. It's more like a hunching of the shoulders. They could care less.
I don't know that they could care less. I think they like to do something more specific about racism.
Now, the ones I've seen have really said, it doesn't bother me. They could care less.
Well, to me, what it is a statement that we will no longer give institutional approval to monuments to slavery. I mean, let's face it. Lawrence and Windsor and Obergefell did not erase homophobia, but they were good steps in the right direction about who we are as a nation, as a city.
And it's even a greater analogy because we still have 2106 in the Texas Penal Code, and they refuse to repeal it. It's kind of like we have to have our monuments.
Well, Right, and those monuments were all put there as a direct response to Jim Crow laws. That's why there are so many that are all from the exact same era. Like I said, we don't. Later on, we stopped the focus on that. We don't have, Korean War statues and things like that. But that was a very specific, concerted effort to respond to Jim Crow and say, no, this is still our heritage.
Mm-hmm. And it's true. Out in Marfa, Fort Davis, out in there, we drove and we stopped at every historical marker we could find. Mm-hmm. And we stopped at one that was kind of in the middle of nowhere and marking where someone's house had been. It was this monument was erected in 1936, as were all these others. And at the very bottom of it said, and it was the house was constructed after it was cleared of Indians and bandits. This is what it said, engraved.
Right.
And that's what I mean. If you go back and, again, do some history, there's nothing misunderstanding about this. There's no muddy waters. It's pretty clear what these statues meant, what the Confederate flag stood for. There's really no real debate about it.
I want to go back to historical markers. Have you ever walked through Pioneer Park? Mm-hmm. Pioneer Park it's actually made up of 4 cemeteries. And I think it's 2 cemeteries that are left. One of the cemeteries was the Jewish cemetery, and they moved all the bodies to the current cemetery on Lemon Avenue at Central Expressway. But and that's where the horses are, or not the horses, the cows are now. But the cemetery that's left are some of the oldest burials in Dallas. And there are names like Stemmons and Munger and Peak and Haskell, and I might be getting some of the names wrong. Gooden, Latimer, and Marsalis are there. And then there are others that have historical markers. Now, as a city, we chose to commemorate, memorialize by giving street names to Good, Latimer, Haskell, Peak, Stemmons. You never heard of the ones that have the historical markers. Do you know what they all have in common? They were all Confederate soldiers.
Really?
Not soldiers, officers. Or one of them was a mayor of Dallas, which I guess deserves the historical marker. But he was a mayor of Dallas and became the lieutenant governor of Texas under the Confederacy.
Because at the time they believed that putting something in bronze made it true, and they raised money for that, and now we just tweet.
Okay, now one other thing, this might horrify you more. When do you think these historical markers were placed?
Not in the 1936.
No, in the
WPA?
1990s. In the 1990s, they were placed.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to go back to what your reasons about wanting to remove these statues. And Lerone, yours would be because they commemorate.
Yeah, wait, I don't know the actual Webster's dictionary of a statue, but usually a statue
a monument
is to glorify something, literally putting something on a pedestal.
And this is glorifying people who glorified slavery.
Thank you.
Okay.
Exactly.
I don't want to speak for the black community. I certainly
I don't either.
I certainly support that reason, but you have more of a connection to that community. And if you're saying, as a black person, this is how I feel, and here's where I would like them removed. And I don't want people telling me, well, I can't speak for them. I'm not trying to speak for them. I'm speaking for me. These monuments have become a rallying cry for Nazis. They'll go to the monuments, preserve our history, and we're not going to let the Jews, and how many times did we hear that in the news this week? We're not going to let the Jews take over. I want them gone because these monuments have become a rallying cry for Nazis.
Certainly what it was in Charlottesville. And the mayor there said, we are the capital of the resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of true. If that kind of a monument is going to draw that kind of a celebration or a reaction from Nazis and KKK and
if we take them away, they will have no idea where to stand.
They won't. Whatever will they do?
Okay, so I want to go on to something else that just hit me this week with Trump's statements, and it was kind of odd that first he came out with a statement of what he really believed. Then somebody must have had a gun to his head because he sure was not comfortable making that second statement that condemned the violence from the extreme right.
But let's
and then
go,
he retracted it.
Yeah.
And
Let's
he
go
was
back.
real comfortable with that one.
After he was forced, I mean, his first statement didn't even come to after 48 hours. So I just want to put that out there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so, but he's using all these terms like alt-right, neo-Nazi. What about goose-stepping and Heil whoever, Trump or Hitler, and carrying Nazi flags? What's neo-Nazi? What's the difference between a neo-Nazi and a Nazi?
I don't think there's any. I think they're just Nazis.
They're just Nazis. Okay, okay, so I'm not crazy there. And what is this alt-right, and now Trump has the alt-left?
Yes.
I mean, obviously we're the alt-left
We're the alt-left,
as far as
yeah.
he's concerned because we're being violent here because we're having a discussion. What is alt-right?
Actually, alt-right, the term, I think it was Richard Spencer's term? It was one of them. I'm going to look it up, but it was the term that they chose to call themselves. And so, but alt-left now is just an insult. I mean, it's a made-up insult to sort of equate our beliefs with the beliefs of the alt-right.
Okay, so it's
Reject
okay
it.
if we just refer to them as white supremacists, Nazis, racists, homophobic, and just what they are. We don't need to recategorize. You know, one thing I like about Richard Spencer, he went to St. Mark's Academy here in Dallas. St. Mark's, which is an Episcopal school, it's about the only school in Dallas that closes for the Jewish holidays every year.
Isn't that interesting?
I'm just pointing that out. So where he got his Nazi whatever from, it wasn't there. So, these monuments, part of the discussion is, should they be in a museum? Should they be, if they need to be in the right context? Where's the right place for them? What museum? If it's in a museum, then we're contributing to maintain this museum. I don't want to do that. I don't mind contributing to a history museum that teaches actual history, but what's the right setting, Karen?
The right setting for
these monuments.
For these monuments? Well,
Can you use
I
those
had
words
some
on the radio?
suggestions regarding Collin County, but I'm not going to say them now because they were tongue-in-cheek. The right setting for them, in my opinion, why are we going to save them for anything? The right setting, in my opinion, is the smelter. But I understand that there are people that want to hold on to that, and so maybe we do that gradually. Maybe there is somewhere we move them. But I heard all the arguments about I don't want my tax dollars used to take these monuments down. But here's the fact: the tax dollars of the citizens of the city of Dallas have been paying to maintain those since 1936, and that includes the black citizens of Dallas who've been paying to maintain those. So any argument about taxes, I don't want to hear it. But I don't want my tax dollars to go to maintain them. I put them out in a field somewhere and let them rust.
And the mayor of Baltimore, in the dark of night, said, we're not having this kind of violence, this kind of uproar in our city in Baltimore. Worked with contractors. They got those things gone in 4 hours. And
Right.
never interrupted traffic. And I don't know where they put them, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, they're gone.
That
They're
was
gone.
my comment yesterday. Specifically addressing Mayor Rollins and the council, which is let's reject the narrative that this is a complicated issue. It's not. It's easy.
It's not.
Channel your inner Baltimore and get them gone.
Yeah.
Since, there's hundreds of these statues around the South, and since 2015, 60 have been removed so far. So I think the trend is going to continue. I find the argument interesting for those who want to keep them or want them kept up when they say we're just trying to preserve our history, our Southern pride. And my response to that is fine. But you have to acknowledge what it really stands for, because you keep yelling that it's not racist. The Confederate flag is not racist. The general was not racist. What he stood for is not racist. And okay, that's absolutely not truth. If you're going to, embrace your so-called Southern pride, you need to embrace the truth also.
Get a book.
Thank you.
And there have been people, even LGBT people, saying Lee was actually a great man. He was an honorable soldier in the United States Army. And I was like, all before. And I'm like, well, Benedict Arnold was too. We don't see a lot of statues of Benedict Arnold around the country. You know, he was a general in the Revolutionary Army, and he betrayed the country. He was a traitor. He brought arms against the United States, which is exactly what Lee did. It doesn't really matter what you've done before. If you become a mass murderer, you kind of erase your opportunity to be considered in your whole life. Your act supersedes everything about you.
Okay, so one of the things that Trump threw out is, where do we stop with this? Do we get rid of every monument to Washington and Jefferson? They had slaves as well. What's the answer to that?
They didn't fight in a war over slavery. And they did lots of
on the wrong side.
Right, on the wrong side. They weren't traitors to the United States by seceding from the Union. They didn't lose either.
Right. Yeah, that too. and one of the best analogies I've heard, this week was, could you imagine if the people in Germany erected statues of Hitler up and having to see the kids go to the schools and see that?
I heard a really great a story this week from a guy named Levi who grew up going to Lee Park and said, man, I love Lee Park so much. I thought it was so great until I realized that had it contained a statue of Hitler, I would have had a very different experience because I'm Jewish.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And actually in Germany, statues to Hitler, the Nazi Party, all that's illegal.
Exactly.
We have freedom of speech. Theirs, they put some limits on. They put the limits where they know it's dangerous.
Well, we have a few states also where it's illegal to take them down. I think it's South Carolina. You can't take those Confederate statues down until you change the law, because they know, for those who think this is such a new issue, it's not, because people did want them down, so they went and passed laws to make sure they stayed up.
Ambassador Nikki Haley fought that fight when she was governor of South Carolina, but that was actually over the Confederate flag.
Flying it at the Capitol.
Yes.
Right.
That's amazing.
And speaking of the Confederate flag, and I want to know what you think of this one, because I have kind of mixed feelings on this one. Six Flags has decided to change its policy. They used to have each of the six flags that flew over the state. Instead, they're going to fly six American flags. I'm not questioning they're flying six American flags. Nothing wrong with that. But what do you think of them taking down the six flags?
I learned that about the Six Flags over Texas from the amusement park, but I somehow wonder why we're allowing amusement parks to teach that history. So I think probably the amusement parks can get out of the history business and we can focus on that in school.
I agree with that.
And I'm with you that I learned that bit of history when I moved here, because who thought about it, living in other states particularly. But I'm with you on that. That's where I learned it.
See, I learned it when I was in West Texas before we moved overseas. We had to have a class of required to have a class of Texas history.
Sure.
So we learned it then, and then when I saw the Six Flags, I thought, well, that's kind of cool. You can actually see them and count them out and see the order that they were there and everything. But the older I've gotten, especially when it's Six Flags in other states and stuff, I'm like, I don't understand that. That doesn't make sense.
Right.
But one flag, call it one flag.
To be honest, that would have never come up as a focus. Six Flags actually brought that up themselves. I don't recall the public dialogue being critical of Six Flags over Texas. That was their choice to do it.
I think it's an interesting thing that they did, because you're right. I think they wanted to avoid any kind of criticism.
Yeah.
It was preemptive before it got to them.
Well, and there are Six Flags amusement parks in Georgia, and I don't know what flags they put up there.
In Kansas,
who knows?
Because Georgia wasn't under Six Flags, right?
We help
Six
them
Flags
rebrand themselves.
Right. Six Flags is a company. It has a lot of amusement parks underneath that banner named different things.
And speaking of companies, I think it's so interesting in this age of Trump that actual companies are having to put out statements that they have nothing to do with anything, like Tic Tacs. Like Tic Tac had to put a statement out about Tic Tac back when
The tiki torches.
And the tiki torches this week. The company that makes tiki torches says, hey, we have nothing to do. I mean, like, these are inanimate objects that have been made into something else.
And this week we're back to I'm never shopping at Home Depot again because the founder of Home Depot, he's not associated with the company anymore. And so there's just, I'm so worn out from having to dig so deep on everything, aren't you?
Yeah. Like, is it safe to go into Home Depot anymore? I don't know. We have to check it. How about Target? How about,
I don't blame an existing company for what their founder, who is no longer associated with the company, did. That said...
So he's not associated with it?
Well...
He made his money. He sold it, got out.
Okay,
right,
I didn't realize that.
Out.
Okay.
But that said, the place where I have had the most anti-gay experiences has been in Home Depot. But there's a certain clientele or demographic that they cater to that has a tendency to have Confederate belt buckles.
I'm not sure which Home Depot you're shopping in, but
I know I need to go. I know,
not
but at the
one
same
in
time, it's Homo Depot, right?
Right, exactly.
So, we need to take a break. We'll take it a minute early. You're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 Knon FM. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Lerone Landis and the late Patti Fink, and our guest is Karen McCrocklin, and we'll be back with more of her opinions in just a moment.
Hi, this is Valletta Lil, and I listen to Lambda Weekly. I hope that you will too.
And this is Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Lerone Landis and the late Patti Fink. You know what? Our recording of last week's show, this week's show, Doc, who usually records stuff, his computer crashed. Oh. And so we're trying to get him set up with something, and so we can get it recorded again. The station might have copies of the show, and I didn't have a chance to get up here to see if they do. Not that they might have a recording. It's there somewhere. It's a matter of finding it and cutting it and posting. But usually it's Doc on a computer at home that records the show, and it wasn't over last week and this week's either.
Love you, Doc. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. He's been just for years. He's just been a workhorse, taking care of our show that way. Lerone, the Trump.
Well, yeah, so since day one, everybody's kind of have had their bets on how long Trump is going to last in the White House, whether it be him getting impeached and removed from office, or will he resign. So now, of course, after this week, those talks are backfired up. And the guy who co-authored the book, Art of the Deal, that Donald Trump wrote some time ago, named Tony Schwartz, he's known Trump for over 3 decades. He was writing this book very closely to him. He came out this week and said that he is pretty sure that Donald Trump will resign before year's end.
What was his reason for that?
Well, he's saying that his presidency is effectively over, with everybody jumping ship. He hasn't passed any major legislation, and he's just flying by the seat of his pants.
There was an article this morning in one of the big papers, I can't remember which one, about how Trump doesn't really seem to like his job. I think it was in the Post. It was an opinion piece. Trump doesn't like his job, so why did he just resign? So
right.
Yeah, but
so what do y'all think? Do you think there's a chance of that? Because he's also the same type of guy who's so hard-headed and stubborn that even when things are not going well, he's not going to back down. I just don't see him resigning.
What I think is so ridiculous is the filing within hours of taking the oath of office at that very small inauguration of 3 to 5 million people, that they filed to run again in 2020. But I really think, and I thought, well, that's insane. He's never going to make it that far. He's never going to be able to run another time because he's going to be removed in one way, shape, or form. But the fact that he's filed, I think it's so that he can keep having these rallies, because that is his sustenance. That's his food. And that's what he goes to and does when his fragile, tiny little ego needs to be fed.
I'm sure there's a staff member who's like, the president's looking droopy. Let's go to Ohio.
Yeah, let's have a rally, because he can't handle it.
Why can't he have a rally that isn't a campaign rally? Why can't he just say, hey, I'm going to, such and such arena, and I'm going to speak? He is the president.
Right.
I mean, I don't think he understands the power of the presidency or what his job is. But
That's clear.
I don't think I don't think there's anything stopping him, and that it has to be a campaign rally. He can go, he can talk, he can say what he wants. He's the president.
But see, a campaign rally will draw his people.
Right.
You know, the mindless people who say, yes, 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 we know you're stupid and you can't do any of these things, but we love you and we'll vote for you. And yes, you can stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot us, and it's just fine. Those are the people he wants to come. If he was just a president speaking, he could draw protesters.
I think there's a technicality too about the re-election committee being allowed to pay for all of the "We love you, Donald" stuff that they give freely to the crowd.
If he's going just speaking, then the government pays for it. He doesn't have to raise the money to do it.
Right, but again, he doesn't get to.
You think it's not quite as free a speech?
I don't know, but if given the choice today to start a re-election committee, I'm not so sure that they would have bothered.
I don't know where the donors would
I
be.
don't have an answer to this. I'm just kind of wondering, why does he have to do it as a campaign? But there might be some technicalities, and part of it is who pays for it. But
How many of you are involved in a betting pool where you buy a square like you do in the Final Four on what day Trump will no longer be the president?
see, here's where I don't think he'll resign.
I don't think you're right.
I think as people talk about him resigning, he kicks in his heels or digs in his heels, and I'm not going to leave. I think the same thing happened during the campaign. I don't think he ever expected to get as far as he did, but as late night talk shows and news broadcasts questioned his ability to win the presidency, I'm going to just do it. I'm going to show them all, and he did.
I don't think he'll ever resign. I think he'll barricade himself in the Oval Office when Mueller has to send the FBI to remove him.
Exactly. That's exactly what I think's going to happen. And Kellyanne will be clinging to his ankles as they drag him away. No!
And Melania will be getting out her prenuptial agreement.
Patty, have you gotten your request to get her on the show yet? Has she answered?
Who, Kellyanne?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay, we haven't heard from her yet.
Not a peep from Kellyanne.
A little interesting tidbit here. The Kennedy Center Honors, which is not till December. Every year the president attends this. Well, the honorees this year have threatened that they would not participate if Trump was there, and he has applied.
He said to keep it non-political.
He will not be there.
Not a friendly crowd.
Yeah.
No MAGA hats.
Things are bad.
It was the right thing to do.
It was the right thing
because, why ruin this whole event? It's an event he didn't want to go to anyway, I'm sure. So, honoring people that he doesn't like. So,
there were signs last night at the rally that had, things about the alt-right in terms of computer terminology and different combinations of keys. Because Control-Alt-Delete, a lot of people know that allows you to turn your computer off and such. And so the geek, the guy I worked with, who was there last night, Brian, graduated #1 in his class of a School of Engineering at A&M. The guy's brilliant. Anyway, he was looking at the sign last night that said Control-Alt-Right, the right arrow, delete. And he goes, I don't think that's kosher. I don't think that's right. He's like, Control-Alt-Right arrow is going to turn your screen from change the orientation of your screen.
That'd be fine with me.
I'm like, hey, works for me.
Works for me.
Okay, so another thing that happened this week was Steve Bannon resigned, was allowed to resign, was fired.
I read that he was fired.
I think he was given the opportunity to turn in his resignation.
No matter what happens, he's going to spin it like a win.
Yeah.
And so what happens now? Are we better off without him? Is Trump's White House better off, more organized without him?
No, because Seb Gorga's still there and Stephen Miller's still there. I mean, the president surrounds himself with people who are, not going to be in the best interest of the American people. The issue with Bannon is this. I don't know if you guys follow Sleeping Giants on Twitter, but they have mounted this amazing campaign to get advertisers to take their advertising off of the Breitbart news site. But here's the fact. Steve Bannon has been fully funded by Robert and Rebecca Mercer for, since eternity. Breitbart was so bottom line is that Breitbart is wholly being funded pretty much now by the Mercers. They're not getting a lot of advertisers, which means the Mercers are paying the freight, so the Mercers' opinion is what's going to happen. That's what Bannon's had a partnership with them forever.
And so is Kellyanne.
Right, and so is Kellyanne also. But I fully suspect that Bannon's going to, I mean, this guy's a survivor. He's like a cockroach. He's going to sit there and, I mean, his quote about my hands are back on my guns, he's going to whip up that little percentage of people. But the problem of it is just like everything else, one tweet gets covered on all media now. One thing on Breitbart, which is a fairly small site in the big picture, gets covered by all media now. So really, to me, he can say whatever he wants on Breitbart, but it's not until the rest of the media says, you know what, we're not going to amplify this signal anymore. That's what's going to make the difference. But I fully expect that Bannon's going to go against Jared Kushner first. Second, I think Bannon's going to go against Paul Ryan. They already took Boehner down. They're going to take, you know, that's what they do. That's what they do. It's like Steve Bannon. Did you see that interview with him in the new American Prospect? He's like, he thinks he's playing three-dimensional chess on a 5-layer board. That's what he thinks. But, I mean, most of the time what ends up happening is he's finger painting with poop.
I totally agree.
That's a nice way to put it. I don't know how to follow that up with a question.
Well, mentioning Kushner, you know, one of the things
mentioning poop.
No. One of the most disturbing things that Trump said when he really said how he felt was that he referred to the Nazis and the response people on both sides. That was really disturbing. How come we haven't heard from Jared Kushner yet, I wonder?
Well, we've rarely heard from him at all. You know, I did see somebody called them Javanka.
I love that.
Instead of like Brangelina,
right.
Javanka. And I loved Borowitz on this. He said they were hiding out on vacation, where they had their heads in the sand because they didn't have to pay attention to any of this stuff. But we don't hear from Jared at all. There was the one time he came out and spoke about having talked to the FBI, I believe it was. He talked for about 10 seconds. And it was over. That's all we got to hear his voice. You know, my sister was going crazy because we never heard him before. We never even heard what he sounds like.
Ivanka did tweet yesterday about how much she thought it was wonderful to see all the people stand up against anti-Semitism and all that in Boston. I think it was specific to Boston, but the thing about Jared Kushner too is that the alt-right we were talking about earlier, they are very, very against him as well. Because, I mean, and I've actually heard this quote from white supremacists say, I want an elected president that doesn't give his beautiful blonde daughter to a Jew. Yep. So, you know, I don't know, maybe, I'm not sure that if I were Jared Kushner I would speak ever at all anyway.
So do you think he takes Kushner down, or?
Bannon will take him down, there's no doubt, because every report I've read has Bannon's main opponents in the White House as Jared and Ivanka, and also maybe and McMaster.
Yeah, he's going to.
Besides Reince. So I'm going to call him Rince.
Rinse, repeat.
You know, but now that he's gone, they were the main opponents of Bannon. So I think Bannon just basically decided his talents are better used elsewhere, and he's probably right.
And his 6 months in the White House, good, valuable experience.
Best moment for Bannon when they went to was it Saudi Arabia? This guy never looked so uncomfortable in his life. All these sheiks, multi-wealthy, he's trying to maybe shake their hands and be included, and they reject him, and they look past him. It's the best video ever of Bannon. So if you ever wanted to cheer yourself up, just Google it. Bannon in Saudi Arabia.
And the reason that they did that to him was because of all the things that he said in Breitbart over the years. But do you really think that he'll be able to take down the president's son-in-law?
Well, I'm defined take him down. I mean, 60-something% of the country wants to take him down, and we haven't been able to be successful. But can you chip away at him? Hell yeah.
Chip away at his power, but so you don't think Jared's gone then?
Oh no!
Okay.
I know.
Okay.
I think this Trump circle. No way. I'm just saying that he's going to erode some of the rest of that 34% of support that Trump has, and so maybe Bannon can be helpful and get Trump down into the teens, so that the GOP in Washington will finally go, yeah, this is a bad idea.
And that's what's going to happen. The GOP in Congress today, even though they control both chambers, will take no action until he becomes a liability to them. It's starting to happen for some, but it's not going to really happen until those polls show that he is less popular than they are, and they are at the bottom of the barrel.
And every day we're creeping closer to the midterm.
But after this week, what more does he need to do to show that he's a liability?
That's what we said the week the video came out with him bragging about groping women.
This is true.
Can you imagine
He just keeps going lower. He's the king of low.
Can you imagine if somebody like, Bill Clinton did that?
Did you think it's interesting that we are in the midst of this era of redefining outrageous every single day?
By the hour sometimes.
Right, by the hour.
I mean, in our office, at the end of the day, if we haven't seen any news, we'll say, "Didn't Trump do anything today?"
There is an entertainment factor to this guy, and I'm not a proponent of it, but I'm going to say that there are a lot of people who are engaged in looking at what he does because they love. I mean, we're in a world right now where people are addicted to outrage, and this guy is, a pusher man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, get some outrage. Come on, first one's free.
Right. First outrage was free. That's good.
So do you think the Democrats have learned anything from all this?
No.
I think a few of them have, but they're not. We need a leader to emerge. That's really what this is about. We need a leader to emerge who can tap into what we're all feeling. And that leader's not done that yet. And it's certainly not Hillary. I love Hillary.
Mm-hmm.
I think she would have made an outstanding, amazing president.
Okay, so we had a caller who called earlier, and let me paraphrase, but felt that the rally yesterday had to do mostly with Hillary losing. It was not about all these things that we're saying. Wasn't about racism. Wasn't about these other things.
Everything has to do with Hillary losing. Everything. And nothing at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't think she was really on people's minds last night.
I don't think so either.
No, she wasn't at all. It had nothing to do with that caller, and I'm sorry to tell you that we've moved on.
Yes, we have.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm feeling, that people really have moved on. That, in fact, do you think there's blame of Hillary and her campaign for not pulling it out?
Well, I think that we don't need to relitigate the whole 2016 election.
And I'm not trying to, but do you think that's kind of the mentality that, well, if she didn't win it, she didn't win it?
No. I mean, I think the mourning period is over, and people are looking forward. But when I said that everything is because Hillary didn't win, what I meant was, every domino that has fallen has led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore any of them. They all exist. But is the focus on that? Absolutely not. And as far as have the Democrats learned anything? I mean, I think we're redefining who the Democrats are, for one thing. There's a lot of conversation about that. But yeah, I mean, but who can... In the big picture, this is so confusing and so out of the ordinary that I think it's going to take longer to learn anything from it, because you got to get over the shell shock first.
And the whole role that the Russian government played, and I mean, because you could see it in fact, like in May, June, July, where the propaganda out there that many progressives were buying into was just crazy. And where's this coming from? And we have to see how far and how deep this Russia investigation goes, because I think it had enormous influence.
It's Mueller time.
We are out of time. Karen, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for what you do every week.
Great panel.
Next week our guest is Lex Trevino from Rainbow Lulek.
Awesome.
Yeah. From everybody here at Knon and Lambda Weekly, have a good week, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Karen.
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like, follow, or subscribe to us and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call.